Presentation Video 7. The first part of the video discusses the body of your presentation and how you can organize it to accomplish your goals. That is followed by a discussion of citations, references, the outline exercise from page 53, and finally there is an example presentation. The body of your presentation is the most important part. It's where you develop your argument. It's the most complex part. Essentially, it should be make a point, support your point, have a transition to the next point, support that point, transition to another point. Of course, it depends on how long your presentation is, how complex, and what you hope to accomplish. You have to organize the points to accomplish your goal. There are many ways to do this. There are some common patterns. One common pattern is to use time. If you want to discuss how some situation developed, you can use sequencing: first, second, third, next. Or you can talk historically. If you want to talk about the Olympics, you can talk about the history of the Olympics, you can talk about the Olympics today, and project to the future. So if you want to talk about how processes or situations evolved, developed, you use time. If you want to talk about human practices or culture, you can organize your presentation around different places. You can talk about marriage in Saudi Arabia and marriage in Japan and marriage in America. You can talk about different places, compare them and contrast them. Another common organizational pattern is cause and effect. You can talk about psychological depression. You can talk about what it is, and then how it affects different groups, workers, children, what have you. Or you can reverse it. You can talk about how depression affects children or workers or students, and then talk about the cause and potential remedies. Advantages and disadvantages, that's another way to organize your presentation. You can talk about what's good about something and about what's bad about it. You can compare. If you want to talk about joining a university club, for example, you can talk about the advantages of being in a club and compare them with the disadvantages. This is very persuasive. In my example presentation, I will organize my talk in a problem solution format. I will explain a problem, its cause, and then talk about the solution. It's another common way to organize a presentation. Basically, there are many ways to do this. It depends on what you want to do. Are you trying to persuade people? Are you trying to sell something? Are you asking for donations? Are you discussing research? You have to organize the body of your presentation according to what you hope to accomplish. Make a point, support it, transition to the next point. Make it very clear and logical.
Facts, citations, and references. Depending on the nature of your presentation and your audience, some of the facts you use may need to be cited. You will have to tell the audience where the ideas came from. If you don't do this, you may be guilty of plagiarism. There are many different systems of citation and reference, varying across academic fields. You may be familiar with APA, the American Psychological Association, or MLA, Modern Language Association. There are others, and different scholarly organizations specify the system they prefer. To cite your sources within a presentation, you can do it as you speak. That is, you can tell the audience where the information came from. Or you can include your written citation on a slide. And then you need to provide a reference list at the end of your presentation. You may recall the reference list in presentation video 5, and here are examples of a citation and the reference list in the video clip that follows. Here's another example of a citation below a chart, and this is what the reference list would look like. For a closer look, you can pause the video.
This is the outline for the following presentation. You can listen to this now as a pre-listening exercise, or you can come back to it later and check your answers as a comprehension exercise. Let's take a look at the outline and see how he operates. The hole in the ozone layer, good news. The introduction is a greeting, attention grabber. He's going to ask, do you know? He's going to ask a question to get people's attention. Preview, he'll explain the cause and talk about the good news. He transitions to the body and he gives a description of the ozone. He defines the ozone and he uses a visual aid. He says it is 20 kilometers from Earth and blocks UV light. He then talks about how the problem was discovered in the 1970s and how it's ozone depletion, it's thinning. It's not a hole, it's thinning. He talks about the increases in cancer in the 80s and 90s and shows a visual aid, the second visual aid. Transitions to the cause, and he talks about chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. He says they are found in spray cans, refrigerators, and air conditioning units. He then explains how the problem occurs. He says the molecules rise up and they migrate to cold areas and destroy the ozone. He then transitions to the solution. The solution, he says, is the good news because they have been banned. He shows a visual aid of the ozone repairing itself, but says there might be a problem in the future with landfills because no one knows how many CFCs are in landfills. He then goes to the conclusion, summarizes, says what the good news is, thanks the audience, and asks if there are any questions. Let's watch the presentation if you haven't already. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim Jensen. I'm a earth scientist at State U. I study the ozone layer. I'm sure you've heard about the hole in the ozone layer. Do you know the good news? Well, in this presentation, I will explain what the ozone is, the problem, and give some good news. It should be interesting. I will start with a graphic that explains exactly what the ozone layer is and where it is. It's between the troposphere and the stratosphere. That's about 20 kilometers from the Earth's surface. It's not very thick. It's a few kilometers thick, but it's very important because it blocks ultraviolet light. And ultraviolet light can be harmful. Too much ultraviolet light can be harmful to plants, animals, and humans. It causes skin cancer. The problem arose in the 1970s when some French scientists discovered that the ozone layer is getting thinner. It is not a hole, it's a depletion. It's getting thinner. And this is allowing in more UV light, and this caused more cases of skin cancer. The problem really got worse in the 1980s and 90s. This chart shows the vertical axis shows the size of the hole, depletion of the ozone, and the horizontal axis shows the year. And you can see how it got rapidly bigger and has maintained and slightly decreased in the last years, which is the good news. The cause of the depletion are chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. These chemicals are used in spray cans, aerosol cans, and refrigerators and automobile air conditioning. What happens is when they are released into the atmosphere, into the air, they float up to the ozone, and then they drift. They migrate to where it's cold. So the depletion of the ozone is greatest above the polar regions, where it's coldest. And these chemicals drift to the cold areas, and then they interact with ozone molecules, destroying them, causing the depletion. The solution, since the problem is caused by CFCs, the solution is to stop producing these chemicals. And that, in fact, has happened. Most developed countries have banned the production of CFCs, and since they did this, the hole in the ozone is repairing itself. This graphic shows the blue area is the hole in the ozone in about 10 years ago, 2012 through 2015. Since then, with the banning of the production of CFCs, the hole has been decreasing, and the future projection is for the hole in the ozone to repair itself. The problem is we don't know how many tons of CFCs are locked in landfills and old refrigerators and old automobiles. That could present a problem in the future as these CFCs are freed from the landfills. But as of now, the hole in the ozone is repairing itself, and that is the good news. In conclusion, since we get such little good news about Earth's environment, I accept this as very good news, and I'm very happy to report it. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I will answer them.